Hello and welcome to Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. Delighted to be joined today by Allan Syms of MYPINPAD. Allan, how are you?
Great, and welcome to my new virtual office down the South Coast, where I seem to have been penned in for quite a few years now. It seems like forever.
We're all climbing the walls a little bit, aren't we, at the moment? It's hopefully not too long. What is it now? Week 9, 10 of being locked down so far. So
like I said,
you're doing well to keep everything going. well done.
We are.
Listen, it's a really interesting subject of where your business sits. Payments and your authentication solutions, I think, is one of those really sort of interesting areas at the moment where there's so much innovation that's been going on for a few years. Your business is, 12 years old now, I understand.
Well, we started in 2012, so...
Is it, sorry, 8 years.
We're about 8 years old. But,
I knew a 12 was in there somewhere through it. So, and the evolution through that period of everything that we've been looking at has been phenomenal. But tell everyone a little bit about the company and the background.
Yeah, so let me start with the beginning, which is always a good place to start to say. But although actually our beginning wasn't the beginning, I'll explain it. In 2012, 3 guys, including myself, sat in a public house in Cardiff. And I met the inventor of the MYPINPAD technology. First time I'd met him, and we had a couple of beer mats, and he said, look, he'd come up with this very interesting methodology to securely enter information into what are insecure devices. So i.e. a mobile phone or any other brand that you may wish to have in you. Those mobile phones are insecure, and going back to 2012, it was quite clear that the computing power then on a mobile phone was getting better and better. And it was also quite clear that even though there was something like 650 million smartphones around the world, we knew that number was going to explode. And today I think it's probably over 3 billion phones around the world, and something like nearly half the world's population actually has a smart device and not just a feature phone. But in 2012, we were predicting what might happen to the mobile phone market or smart devices in general, because it's equally applicable to tablets as it is to mobile phones. And the inventor, Justin Pike, who had a very, very long history in payments, and he had said, look, some time ago, I had thought about how the world is going to change with the introduction of smart devices and how you could use these to change the world in terms of payments. And I'm not from the payments background. I'm actually a PhD guy who spent his life in cancer research. So it was a very strange discussion for me to have. But my role at that table was that I have a background in starting up companies, high technology companies. I've done it for 30 years. Is conceptually, does this seem like a great idea that's got a market need, that what it needs is some money, and what it needs is a means to help move it forward to take it from concept to commercial reality. So we sat in that bar, and having sort of worked our brains on a few local beers, figured out a business plan on the back of that beer mat. So it was the proverbial back of the beer mat business plan. And what we identified was that we felt that the whole, particularly the face-to-face world of payments, was going to change. The old sort of clunky style terminals, as they're called, the POS terminals. And we came up with a concept then. We said, we're going to predict the terminal is terminal. And so as a consequence, they're one day going to go away, and people are going to change the way in which they do payments. And at the same time as that, we also were predicting that the world was going to change in terms of the way that payments were done. Online digital was coming into play. People were beginning to shop online. And now, of course, we know that people shop online a lot. And we will get onto the subject of what COVID's done to the world. But online shopping has really accelerated forward to the point where people don't even use their web browser on their computer anymore. They use their mobile smart device to make payments. And so we were looking at ways in which we could find a new way to look at omni-channel, single familiarity on how you make payments, whether you be in the face-to-face world, or whether you be on the online world, making payments safer, secure, and getting away from the cost of the infrastructure and perhaps the rigidity of the infrastructure. But one thing we know for sure at that time is that whatever you build in the fintech world it's going to have to sit on top of the existing legacy systems. You're not going to reinvent the whole of the way in which the world does payments. What you're looking for is smart ideas, things that will improve the process, make it frictionless, make it easy, make it familiar to people, make it easy for people, and increase security. So that was really where we started back in 2012, and we went and raised our first seed money within in a matter of 6 months. So we were up and running. We have grown the business since that time, and to now we're about 60 odd people. And we have people dotted around the world in terms of specialism. We have people in New Zealand, in Auckland, who are very technically oriented. There's a big tech team out there. We have got sales feet on the ground in Malaysia, Indonesia, in India, the new markets that are arising, the emerging markets. We have a really expert security team based in Sweden, and that pub was in Wales. So our sort of headquarters are in Wales, in Cardiff, and most of our technology people are in Wales. And we also have an outlet in Canary Wharf. So in Canary Wharf, we wanted to be within the banking and the payments area. So we have a sort of the sharp end of the business, the commercial end of the business there. Now, in those early days, with three of us trying to cut up, well, what tasks would we do? And of course, I said to you, I'm not from the payment sector. I was from the life science sector, but I was very much involved in intellectual property, very much involved in licensing. And so for me, the natural role for me was to be a commercial director. So I'm the commercial director of MYPINPAD. And my job is to look after all the intellectual property. And we've got something like 50 granted patents now globally for the MYPINPAD solution. We have another 100 in the pipeline. So for a small business, we spend a lot of money on developing our intellectual property. And we've been very successful in getting those patents granted all across the world. So I look after the patenting, I look after the licensing, and in my part-time I do a bit of marketing because I'm quite keen to make sure that we've got the messaging of the company correct. So that was...
So you keep him busy.
8-year whistle-stop tour of... and I think that it's worthwhile probably looking at 2 or 3 significant milestone points in terms of where we've gone and where we are today. And that is that this technology is not entirely just for payments. This is about entry of any information into a smartphone. It just so happens that the vertical we chose as payments is very clear what the industry is. It's very highly regulated, which is actually very important for us. But you could put any data in the phone and use the same technology. So there will be a broader, bigger brush to paint in the general world of IoT. But for now and for the purposes of your audience and you, this will concentrate on the payments area. And so the milestone for us was the way in which we meet regulation and how we meet standards. Because back in 2012, there weren't any standards by the Payment Security Council for how you would use software in the payment cycle. The old way, you could say, of doing it is very rigid, designed to be very safe, using Fort Knox style POS terminals, and the whole process using, for example, very secure payment HSMs, the whole way in which the payment messages travel along the pipes to the issuers and the acquirers in the business, all very rigid, all very tightly controlled with very clear standards, but no standard for a software solution. Or there wasn't until last year. And we pride ourselves that we work very closely with regulators and we work very closely with the Payment Security Council because we actually think that the industry is so used to being regulated and standardized that to bring a software solution, and that's what we're bringing is a software solution, is you need a standard. And so last year out came what's known as the SPOC standard, which is software pin on COTS devices. So COTS device being any mobile device, and software pin meaning we're not going to be using the traditional methods of entering a pin. We're actually going to use a software solution for driving that. And now, of course, there will be a new standard coming out this year called CPOC, and that's to do obviously with contactless payments on COTS devices. So the world has now moved from being very rigid hardware only into software solutions. And so we're very pleased that one of our big milestones was to become SPOC certified by PCI to actually use our solution on any hardware device, be it iOS, be it Android. That's where we wanted to be. We wanted us to be ubiquitous, and we wanted to be applicable to all hardware devices. So that was a major milestone. We've also had another major milestone in that it's actually taken quite a lot of money, and it's taken quite a long time to get that whole system operational. And it's not just about software PIN entry, it's also about knowing what devices are using that. And so we have built a very sophisticated back end of our system, which is the attestation service, which is checking that the device that's in operation is a genuine device. So we know what the device is, and we also know who you are because you have entered your PIN into that payment solution. And so at this point, the companies are really good crossroads, and now the crossroads is that way is where we deploy. And so our entire sort of momentum has gone towards from development into driving commercialization and getting adoption of this technology throughout the world.
It's a fascinating sort of journey, isn't it? From and I love those sort of stories of businesses that start in a pub, as all businesses should, all good businesses should, and sort of evolve to this international status that you are at the moment. And I think that's a really interesting point to focus on. Look, you've mentioned their countries to some of the worst hit in the world, through to probably the country that's dealt with things better than anywhere else in New Zealand, and have seen probably a whole range of emotions from from a team that's all over the world. How have you managed to keep that going, and people having different issues, different worries, different stresses, and at different sort of times in your business? How's that work for you?
Actually, very well. I have to say, I'm very impressed with the team at MYPINPAD. I mean, my grey hairs tell you I've been around the block a few times, and I've done a number of ventures, technology ventures. The team here is first class, and they're first class because they're excellent in the jobs they do, but they're also first class in terms of their attitude towards doing that job. And so it's not unusual for our team in New Zealand, given the fact they're halfway around the world and using 12, 13 hours different, it's not unusual for them to be working through their night so that they can work with us in the UK through our day. And it's not unusual for our tech teams to be working through their nights to work with those guys. And so, the time zone issue has never been an issue for us, simply because everybody's prepared to be flexible and work well. Zoom has been fantastic, as we're using today, and we have used that consistently. We use the Teams process on Microsoft to communicate, and that works well. And so we've got tools at our disposal that we perhaps didn't have 10 years ago, and that's made it so much easier also to communicate with our team and make it work. So I think, like everybody else around the world, be it personal, be it business, this probably is going to change the way in which everybody works going forward, because we're now getting so much more used to doing this.
And with such a diversified team, I guess some of that sort of remote aspect to what we're, to where so many companies have struggled, have been something which is a little bit more adaptable for you guys, would you say?
I think so. I'm a great networker in my role anyway, or at least I like to think I'm a great networker, or it's just me because I like to go to those parties at the end of the day and socially mix with people.
Going at the right time.
But I call that new business development. And I always find that quite a great way of people feeling more able to open up, discuss new things. And so I do spend a lot of my time out there doing networking, finding out what's going on around the world, finding out what's happening in the industry, finding new leads, finding people who don't know about us who might like to know, and for me to know more about them. That's a little bit difficult to do. If you don't know somebody, then it's very hard to actually bring them into a virtual conference call. You need to have known them to stuff. So I think where it can fall down is that at some point we do need to have that meet somebody new process. And there probably are ways to do that, but that's the bit I'm missing from it at the the moment.
So this is a real common theme. I think if we look at challenges, when I'm talking to leaders within the space, what's rapidly becoming the common thing. People I think are doing really, really well with onboarding people. People are doing really well with communicating with the team. This is this couldn't have happened. As macabre as this is, it couldn't have happened at a better time in terms of technology and how people can communicate. And as you say, 10 years beforehand, we'd have been in a very different way of being able to to communicate. And I think the economic damage would have been far, far worse again. But the thing which I think people are having trouble at the moment in terms of really replacing is that sort of there's conferences that have been cancelled left, right, and centre, as and you recognise all of a sudden the importance that had in the industry. It's so significant in terms of the business development side of what people are talking about. That it's been something that someone needs to plug and miss. Tell us about how you're adapting to that. There's sales still need to be made. People still need to to prospect and such like. Companies have really sort of piled into their brand or their content strategies, etc., etc. How are you adapting to this new world of sales and replacing that networking issue?
Yeah, first thing I would say is that timing-wise for us, when the shutdown came, we already were well into very decent lead generation for our business. And so we have a pretty full pipeline of opportunities. And to be honest, the way in which we were communicating that to the world is, as many other companies would, you want to tell the world through the standard channels that we have, through press releasing, through your PR agency. You need to be doing it through social media in particular. You need to be communicating with the industry as broadly as you can if you want, or targeted and focused on specific requirements that you might want to be getting a message out. So that messaging thing is working quite well for us. I think we're already quite well adept at that in terms of communicating. So to be honest, it hasn't itself, not being out there, made a big impact. This year, us not going to conferences won't change our business at all. Maybe going on in 2 or 3 years, it starts to maybe eat into your new pipeline of generation. But thus far, we are still getting a lot of leads coming in from people who know we're out there, who see our blogs, they see our press releases, they see what's going on. And also because of the relevance right now of these 2 new regulations, SPOC and CPOC. And the reason why that's very relevant is that one of our big missions was, and I keep sort of using a phone, so I use a different phone this time, but was to turn everybody's device into an acceptance payments device. So what we're saying is that for us, our big mission is for those 3.5 billion people that have one of these, we want that to be the means by which you make your payment. And so from our perspective, people are very interested on how do you go from clunky old terminal into modern smart device. How do you actually safely put a PIN number to it? How do you actually make a payment using that? Because you could say, well, in the face-to-face world, when there was a face-to-face world, and I know we'll come back to it at some point, but in the face-to-face world, the idea was you go and shop and you put your PIN number in if it was over whatever the prescribed amount was. And obviously contactless is growing, but nonetheless, PIN number is for us one of the most essential and important credentials you can have. And partly because, and not many people know this, but perhaps who haven't shopped online digitally versus shopped in the face-to-face world, is that PIN number is a really important legal issue there. This is the time which the liability for any transaction passes from the merchant or the scheme to you, the consumer. And I don't know if consumers really know this, and maybe we should be telling consumers more, but when you put your PIN into a payment acceptance device, you are accepting the liability for that transaction. And at that point, it's your problem. It's your issue. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that's a great thing, because when we introduced chip and PIN more than 10 years ago, it knocked 80% out of the face-to-face fraud. But it's a bit like pressing a balloon, because you press it this side and out the other end pops card not present fraud. So it's all
Yeah.
gone online. So what we see is PIN is great, chip and PIN is great, but people need to understand what they've done in doing that. However, how do you do that? So basically, do merchants then have a smart device to accept the payment? And then, of course, you shop online, where everybody's going these days. Everybody wants to shop online. And yet, how do you get that same security? How do you get that same thing? Why can't you, when you're shopping online on a browser or on your phone, why can't you just put the PIN from your card in the phone? And our argument is you can.
Yeah.
Because that's what our solution does. It means it's the same solution online as it is in the face-to-face world. So now we've got this great opportunity to truly deliver what we call omni-channel payments, which is it's the same process whether you're face-to-face or whether or not you're shopping online. If it's a PIN number, it should convert what should be a card not present to a card present transaction, shouldn't it? Isn't that what we want to get to, so that the payments are all the same? The risk is all the same. It's safe, it's secure, it's the same. And it's simple. And everybody knows whether I shop in a store or whether I'm buying something online, I can safely enter my PIN number to secure the transaction. In this new world that we live in with COVID, I wonder if anybody has thought about whether merchants who never used to take online orders have really thought about what's happening with them beginning to accept online orders. Because, for example, a pub that would most of the time be accepting face-to-face payments, and because they're innovative and say, look, during the time of lockdown, we want to provide takeaway services.
Yeah.
We want to take orders online. So they take an order online, but that's a different payment. That's a card not present payment. There's a different liability risk. There's different rates. The interchange rates are different. Have they realized that actually, because there's no PIN gone in, the responsibility might be down to the merchant, not down to the consumer? Has anybody really thought about how this world is changing? Have we thought about also the consumers that, there's a lot of people that never shopped online at all. and now they are. And are they dealing with it? Do they know what to do?
It's a very new. I mean, look, you only have to look at my parents and such like, and seeing them do shopping in a completely different world. It's the same all the way around, that people have to adapt to this sort of thing. And I think that look, we spoke about this before. It's a very difficult time to know how to sort of pitch your story and to say it. But for you, and you look at the data issues that are coming out, and breaches that are coming out there left, right, and centre at the moment, and how fraud is very much at the forefront of criminality at the moment. This is like a the speak. We've spoken about Zoom and their advance over the last couple of months. It must be a very similar sort of reaction to what's happening for you in your market, right?
It is, but it's a great segue into a word that we're going to see a lot more, which is the word trust. Do I trust something? How do I know I can trust it? We want it to be a trusted payment within a trusted world. And so therefore, for us as MYPINPAD, what's really important is to make sure we offer, if you like, the gold standard in how you can safely and securely initiate a transaction that you can trust. And we're going to bring that trusted word a lot more. You will see a lot more communications coming from the company focusing on that word trust. But also I think there's another word called inclusivity, because we have to think about new technologies. And I think you were right to mention sort of your parents, or, there are certain demographics that didn't used to shop online, that are shopping online, don't feel necessarily that comfortable with it. I mean, it was the same thing with contactless cards. There were demographic changes in terms of those that felt comfortable or not comfortable. But there is a requirement for us to make sure that everybody feels included in that feels that they can do it and make it simple. And from our viewpoint, to make a process about putting your PIN to secure and authenticate a payment into a mobile device should be a ubiquitous way in which payments are made using the trusted credential, which is called your PIN. And I wanted to bring up another issue on inclusivity because, there's a lot of, I suppose there's a lot of argument to say, well, hang on, let's think about, when we say inclusive and you've got a touch screen device, and it's fantastic in these days of COVID because I can polish that off with a cloth and that's nice and clean. So therefore it doesn't have any virus on it. And it's even better if it's your device you're putting the PIN in because you can trust it's your device. That's a great thing to do. But what about those who are disabled? What about, the visually impaired people? How are they going to deal with the fact that that is a polished screen with no ability to know what's on there?
Yeah.
And we've even thought about how to do that. So we have a solution which will allow the visually impaired to actually put an overlay onto a smart device and know exactly where the numbers are. And that, I think, is the way in which this company has been formed throughout, which is even from day one, we were thinking, how do we include everybody?
Yeah.
How do we make it ubiquitous? Let's not make it dependent upon the technology. Let's involve everybody, and especially those groups that are often disadvantaged. We're not going to have that. We want to provide solutions throughout, and that's what we do.
I think that's a really important piece to add there, because look, there's been so much, as I said right at the offset, there's been so much innovation in your space, so many different people who've gone through it. If you look at fintech, to many people fintech is just payments, right? It's one of those areas where it can range from capital markets through to to all sorts of different areas of to wealth, to everywhere that we look at. But payments has probably been the darling of the fintech movement. There's been so much things that have gone through with there. But when you look at it and when you think about it and when you see a lot of the messaging, it is still terribly technical and terribly complicated in terms of how it's trying to sort things through. So you have to be almost robotic to be able to utilize some of the solutions that's coming out there. And for you to look at that sort of thing, I guess is a different set of eyes on a problem. And quite often I see the beauty of fintech in trying to make complex things quite simple and usable.
I think, we sometimes struggle when we get put into that category of fintech.
Yeah.
Are we really fintech?
Yeah, I think everyone says that no matter which area of fintech they're in, right?
and a lot of people, I think, originally put fintech down because that sounded like dollar signs. If I'm fintech, somebody's got to invest in me because fintech's cool and you get quick returns and you can grow very quickly and we can all become unicorns overnight. and of course they never do. Very rarely do the things happen overnight. But I do think that you do have to make things simpler. And it's our job to do the techie smart stuff and put it under the radar. The user doesn't need to know what particular speed of processor is in a device necessarily. They just need to know it works well and it works fast and it does what I need it to do. What we want to say is we want it to be simple. We want you to get, as we all are, at least in the UK, we all know our PIN number. We're all used to putting PIN numbers in devices.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if everybody could just put their PIN in their own device to be secure about a transaction? And it's as simple as that. This is how much I'm being asked to pay. It's on my phone, so I trust it. And if I shopped online and I had a little note that said, by the way, you're about to buy a colour television for £1,000, are you okay with that? I quite like that. Quite like the idea. I know that I'm buying something that I'm ordering.
Yeah.
I think, we can bring that level of comfort. So.
And we've been flying through this, and I've just looked at the time and realised how quickly this half hour has gone. But I'm going to ask you to just a couple of extra things just before we sign off. Look, if you're going to take the lessons of what I think it's really important for every negative to have a positive. And if we look at this period, there's been everyone's learned an awful lot. I think everyone's going to come out of this, hopefully, as many people as possible are going to come out of this, a lot better from it. If you were to give a couple of bullet lessons about what you've seen from this and how it's going to make you and the business better from it, what would you say they'd be? What would you share with people watching?
Well, there are 5 rules of business that I've always had in my life, which is, number one, be very clear about what the opportunity and where the need is. And that need can change and it can flex. And so be nimble enough to make sure that we're clear that our mission is still correct. In a changing world, that we still have something relevant to that need. And so matching your solution, which is number 2, with the need, really important. And then the other 3 things are your team, your team, your team. Because you don't go anywhere without a good team. And so for us, using a new means of communicating, we're probably communicating a lot more than we ever did as a team. And with the challenge that we have with a dispersed team around the world, to be able to link us all in, this is a really good thing for us. And it's really helped us realize the tools were there. We didn't use them as well as we are now. The need for our product is clearly there. There is a need to change the way in which people handle devices out in the world. The risk of fraud is there. We have provided a solution for that. Our mission is no different, but I think we're better at doing it.
Listen, that's great, and I agree with that completely. We've got an office here in London and an office in New York, so not quite as spread as you, but right in the epicenter of both 2 of the most affected areas. And I think if I'm looking at one of the lasting benefits for us from this is I don't think that US team and that UK team have ever been closer and in contact more from it. So it's exciting about how we can utilize that and move it through. And those 5 things I think are great to hear. Listen, Alan, I could be going on for a lot longer on this. It seems like we've scratched the surface, and maybe that's one for another episode. When all of this is cleared up, we'll bring you into the studio and we can have a proper face-to-face conversation as well. But thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and insight. If people are listening and sat there on their devices and thinking, you know what, he's talking some sense here, how can they get in touch and find out a little bit more?
Well, first go to our website at MYPINPAD.com. There you'll get all the contact details. You'll see what our solutions are. You'll see what our mission and how we're trying to project ourselves into the marketplace. Otherwise, I'm sure they can come through to me directly through our agents and elsewhere. But go to the website. It's easier to just go on there and you'll find a contact number. What I guarantee anybody is when they put an info request on the website, I get to see it directly myself. So I know I will get that message directly.
Good man. Well, listen, it's been brilliant to hear the story. I've loved it. It's been enjoyable and entertaining at the same sort of time, and I'm really interested about the sort of area that you're building out. So good luck to it. Good luck with everyone, and I hope everyone stays happy and healthy across the world for you.
Absolutely.
And really appreciate your time.
Not at all. Enjoyed talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Alan, and thanks to all you for watching. We'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks for watching.